in America, more than 90% of the companies, corporate America, is owned by three companies. BlackRock, which owns 10 trillion of corporate America, State Street, and number three, Vanguard. So these three companies, private equity companies, own 90% plus of corporate America. Like, can you share how does it work?
I remember at a point in time sending like 4,000 emails to get like a research internship in Netherlands. So I actually worked directly with the Ministry of Finance. One of a very integral initiative that I also worked on was to create a $2 billion fund, which was co-sponsored by the government of India and co-sponsored by the government of the US.
What you had achieved in India is like dream, far-fetched dream for many Indians. What were you thinking about your ambitions? So hello everyone, today my first day in Bay Area with Kanika. So she got into MIT from a tier 2 college in India, and now most importantly we'll be exploring three biggest topics right now. Coming to the US, getting 100% scholarship at MIT, how hot MIT is after some funding cuts, and next finance and finance plus AI in Bay Area. So hi Kanika, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi Harnoor, thank you so much for having me. As Harnoor quickly just gave a brief, I'm currently at MIT. I'm studying there with a 100% scholarship. I'm doing my MBA and I'm also researching in AI. Even with regards to whatever is happening, I think US is still an amazing place to be in. MIT has been very well serving for me. I absolutely love my time there. I'm here in SF for about 2 months for my internship. It's been an amazing place here as well, just with regards to how much of an AI solution and products that are building. And yeah, exciting time to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. First of all, I want to really get into your journey to MIT. Like for example, like MIT, whenever I go there, I see 90% of the students from IIT in India. So how did the dream to come to MIT start? Because like coming from especially finance background, MBA, you did undergrad in CS, right?
Yes.
CS, and now you wanted to segue into finance and MBA. Like currently, because of MBA like has 1 year OPT in many colleges. Of course, MIT has STEM, so 3 year milta. I know that. But like, how does a dream to come to MIT for a finance background come?
Yeah, so I think, and I'll trace back to how my undergrad was. I didn't do well in JEE, and so I got into a tier 2 college, but I always wanted to be part of a top university, and MIT was always on my radar. So during my undergrad, I really created those opportunities for myself. And a lot of that was really, you know, shooting out cold emails to startups or like getting research projects. So yeah, I think in each of the semesters in my undergrad degree, I picked up like 3 internships at the least to gain that exposure.
Wow.
And eventually during that period, I realized that my interest was really in finance. So after I completed my undergrad degree, I ventured into investments, worked with the government, a couple of financial services firms as well. And yeah, was super interested then as I was looking at MIT with all the AI hype and wanted to be here.
Especially about your background, even though people will say that you're coming from tier 2 college, your background isn't ordinary. You have worked with government of India, you have managed a $400 million fund for the US in India while working for a financial company in Pune. You have actually worked for sovereign fund in India. These opportunities aren't easy. You've worked for Ministry of Finance in India. So how someone from a computer science background in India get these opportunities?
Yeah, I think I've been a very huge proponent, Harnoor, of networking and being very strategic about it. Even during my undergrad, during the 4 years and how I got those internships, it was majorly by networking. And I'll not just say that shooting out cold emails is the only way for you to be able to network, but being part of different conferences that align with your interest, or being very objective about, okay, this is the goal or this is the industry that I want to be in, and being very proactive about looking at, conferences or like just networking with people without an intent, but just to know about the industry and building those connections.
So I was reading the book by Milton Friedman, who talks about free markets, capitalism, who inspired in the 60s to America. So capitalism works when everyone has access to the same information. But India mein, in remote colleges, you don't have the same information that IITs have. So biggest disadvantage for you versus other universities is access to the information, access to resources such as like knowing what conferences you want to go, knowing the research opportunities, and then applying there. Like hard work, chahe aap dono same karo, but like that hard work to the right information is important. So how did you get that right information and opportunities?
Precisely, Harnoor. When I got into that tier 2 college, I know that the kind of opportunities that I would have gotten if I were in an IIT, I would not get. And so from the day one, I was very proactive in ensuring that my level of exposure is not restricted to the college that I go to or the kind of people that I'm surrounded with. So from very day one, I ensured that I read consistently about what is happening in the world. I was very active on LinkedIn. So I used to, even at that time as a 17-year-old, I used to connect with like CEOs to understand what is happening in their industry, to make some perspective of my own. And from that, I started to read a lot of research papers of any random topic that came to my interest at that point in time. And through that, I connected with a lot of people on LinkedIn and eventually created those opportunities for myself. I remember at a point in time sending like 4,000 emails to get like a research internship in Netherlands, because I saw that an international experience will really give me that exposure, and a lot of people at MIT were actually handed that opportunity in a plate. But for me to make that extra effort by sending out so many cold emails, to read through research papers of so many professors so I can really customize some of those emails, I think it developed a lot of knowledge for me, as well as helped me get that exposure that I was looking for.
And especially right now, people talk about cold emails way more after reading Soham Parikh's cold email. What can we learn from your cold email skills?
I think it's a lot of persistence. It's a lot of not shooting in the dark. I think, of course, cold emails even now has become, very simpler with ChatGPT and other AI resources that you have, and also like just the access of information of how much there is on the internet. I think that point in time, it was still restricted in the sense it was a lot time taking, I would say. And while I am actually a big fan of Soham Parikh's cold email template. But yeah, I think something to note from there is that he made sure that he quoted and spoke in the language of the receiver. So quoting a couple of very good startup books that founders typically read, being very customized in the kind of email that he was writing. I actually get a lot of cold emails from people who want to work in my non-for-profit, but I still see that they have like your company jaisa ChatGPT template comes and they just like send that. So like just ensuring that the kind of email, the kind of receiver that you are sending it to, the email is very well structured and suited for them.
Excellent. Okay, now let's get into finance in depth. I want to learn how private equity works. Let me tell you an example in America how it works. In America, more than 90% of the companies, corporate America, is owned by 3 companies. BlackRock, which owns 10 trillion of corporate America, State Street, and number 3, Vanguard. So these 3 companies, private equity companies, own 90% plus of corporate America, like Vanguard, S&P funds. So can you share how does it work?
Yeah, just from that perspective, I think private equity has a lot of tranches into it. If you look at, 2 major tranches that form part of private equity, is essentially, private assets, if you think of it, and infrastructure. And when I say private assets, I mention more about like growth equity firms, so like private companies. So if you talk about mature companies across sectors, they obviously want to scale, so they are wanting to raise more money, and after they cross a certain threshold of their scale, they have established their business model, everybody in the market knows what they do, so there's less of a risk factor. That is one portion of private equity, which we say as investing in private companies.
Less risky assets, which have
Precisely.
already worked in some markets, and when they come into, let's say, American market from existing markets, you invest into it.
Precisely. Another tranche of it also is infrastructure assets. So for example, if you look at roads, ports, airports, all of these assets are really created by bundling in capital from a lot of resources, but eventually how they are invested is through a general manager who really manages this money from a lot of players in the market. So this manager is essentially who the private equity firm is. So if you talk about Blackstone or BlackRock, for example, they would have a lot of governments, a lot of sovereign wealth funds, a lot of institutions that will give money to BlackRock. So they'll form a pool of money and then they'll invest in different assets. So infrastructure, as I said, is another one. Another very less known but very less lucrative, I would say actually, is investing in funds of funds. So for example, like BlackRock decides that, okay, it's like investing in mutual funds, that you are not investing in a asset, but you are investing in a fund that invests in an asset.
I see, like existing, like Nifty, S&P 500.
So that's more for public equities, but fund of funds are very, private, for example, in the sense that if I, as a Blackstone, want some exposure into some risky companies or some young startups, I will invest in YC. Just as I got money from, say, a sovereign wealth fund that invested in me to invest in assets, I will give money to YC to invest in startups. It's the same.
So number one, direct companies, growth companies, which are growing really fast. Number two, funds of funds. For example, investing in a fund which is investing in Anthropic, Cursor, etc., etc. Number three, infrastructure, like BSNL, MTNL, etc., which is unused.
Correct.
Got it. So these are three, and I want a very clear-cut example. Let's say I wanted an opportunity to work at BlackRock in their private equity. Let's say their growth fund. So what specific example should I give it to them so they hire me?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question, and how probably you can approach this is by learning more about BlackRock first. If they invest in India, what are the subsectors that they are aggressively looking at? And it is public information. So for example, if you come across a press release where the CEO or the head of BlackRock's funds in India are saying that they want to go big in healthcare, then you focus yourself in healthcare. You pick out some of the major companies in India that are in the healthcare space but are not very evident. So some companies that make the headline, but there are some companies that don't make the headline but are very profitable. So that's where you drill down deeper into the sector to realize what the market mapping looks like. Healthcare, maybe there are like pharmaceutical companies, there are hospitals, but then there are some health tech companies that are emerging. So choose that sector and form a view about that sector, that which of these sectors is more profitable or is expected to be more profitable in the coming years.
What was your majority of your work in India? You work for private equity as well as sovereign wealth fund in India. So what was your expertise in which actually was related to the experience MIT wanted to accept you?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. So I actually worked directly with the Ministry of Finance, where I helped them structure their entire asset monetization initiative, which was about $22 billion revenue stream for the country. As part of that experience, I also set up the National Land Monetization Corporation, which is like a government-owned company that will take this entire framework that I created for years to come. So it was a very impactful experience where I was working directly with the Minister of Finance, the Secretary in the Finance Ministry, and it was really like working in a startup but in a government setup.
So allocating funds that private equities can take in future and grow out of it.
It's majorly like the asset that we have. So you are the asset owner here.
Government.
The government is the asset owner here. And monetization in this sense means that, for example, if another company wants the land asset, they can take that for their own utilities, where the private equity here can come into places that, for example, BlackRock has a real estate portfolio. What they would do is that they will acquire a lot of these land parcels and then they will further lease it. So this is where the private equity angle can come in as well in this whole picture.
So like allocating it for private equity, keh sakte, right?
But like monetization was for both, like it was for private equity
and
or for
government.
Companies as well. Like whoever wants to take the land parcel can take it, because these were underutilized assets for the government, and the government wanted to create a revenue stream out of it, but it was completely clueless. So I came as a finance expert to tell them how the entire investment framework can be created for them to monetize it.
So basically, you figure out the assets which are underutilized and you let private equity capitalize them. So this was Ministry of Finance. Now, what about Sovereign Wealth Fund of India?
Yeah, so as part of the Sovereign Wealth Fund of India, I think I got a broader exposure where I was working with the government of India, and I was part of the task force. I was youngest to be part of these task force, where we were eventually finding ways to be able to create investment framework for strategic sectors of the country, so including space tech, clean tech, and a couple of other sectors as well. So as part of that experience, I created the investment framework for offshore wind energy. So it's more about how to get capital from all over the world to invest in offshore wind energy of the country.
Like solar, wind, etc.
Precisely. A lot of like renewable energy related assets, space tech as well, as I mentioned. So as part of that experience, one of a very integral initiative that I also worked on was to create a $2 billion fund, which was co-sponsored by the government of India and co-sponsored by the government of the US. It's called a blended finance fund. So essentially what blended finance means is that for markets which are emerging like India, the government really subsidizes the private capital return. So for example, if you are a private equity investor in the US, and you will make say 15% here in the US, if you want to make the same 15% in India, considering the currency fluctuation, you won't be able to make that, correct? Because depreciation of the currency per annum you have to take into consideration, which is about 2% or something. And then there's a lot of high risk involved in investing in India compared to the US as well. So you would want to make slightly higher or even equal, so to say.
So government subsidizes it so that the loss of capital coming in is considered.
Correct.
So like 2% in currency depreciate हो रही है, so investors are more attracted to invest
essentially. So there are a lot of models how these return structures work in private equity. So it's essentially like government बोलेगी that we'll take a slightly lesser return from whatever capital that you invest in, and we'll give you the higher return.
I see. So it's very interesting because I think China does something similar. For example, they give land for cheap to BYD so that they can capitalize, and how it's competing with Tesla.
It's a very well-known structure, and it's been very, very helpful for a lot of countries to pool in capital from all over the world to encourage growth in their own country.
Excellent. How much was your contribution to attract more capital? If you can measure it, how would you measure your contribution towards India's sovereign wealth fund that attracted more capital in India?
Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer. But yeah, I think I was very fortunate to have an amazing team that I was a part of. And we were about 3 or 4 people that were handling the creation of this fund that I'm talking about. And also when I was working with the Ministry of Finance, it was really like working just with 4 other bureaucrats and in a very high-stake environment where you have pressure from all over, from all your stakeholders. So yeah, I would not quantify that number, but yeah, I think I hope I was helpful in bringing in huge amounts of capital in the country.
And once again, how someone gets opportunity right after graduating as a computer science grad. So you first got private equity opportunity, right? You worked at private equity in Pune, and then you got into Ministry of Finance and then Sovereign Wealth Fund. So was it like a clear path, or like जहाँ पे आपको अच्छा लगा you just went in?
Not at all. I think throughout my life I have not had a clear path. As I said, like people say that, it's still a shocker that from a tier 2 college you can make it into MIT, and a conventional path would not have led me to this journey. So even after like the financial services firm that I said I worked for, it was a lot of like going to these conferences, and also because as part of that experience, even now I think as a second nature it has come to me to be able to network with people and form connections, and I absolutely love doing that. So while I was working with the financial services firm in private equity, I met the ex-chairman of McKinsey at one of the events. I read about his work. I at the very first meeting, I contributed to, how he can think about a particular sector that he was looking at, and that really impressed him. We were in conversations for a couple of months, and he had seen the kind of work and the kind of caliber and the financial acumen that I had established, and he recommended me to the Ministry of Finance directly to come in as a finance expert. So I think these opportunities align when you are true to your intent, you are true to your skills, and that you love meeting people and you love building those networks and relationships.
So now I want to learn about your ambition. What you had achieved in India is like far-fetched dream for many Indians. What were you thinking about your ambition? Were you like contented in life, or you wanted achieve way more than that?
I am a firm believer, Harnoor, that you should never be contented in life. I mean, of course, you should be happy with what you have, certainly, but you should always look for what is next. And I think my failure with regards to not getting into IIT just instilled in me this second personality where I'm always on the lookout for what next. What other opportunities should I pick up to be able to leverage? And so while I did all that I did in India, create such good impact by God's grace, but eventually from that experience, I had seen, how AI and technology was really transforming. This is essentially, as people call it, the most significant technology revolution in the history of mankind. So I wanted to be closer to that. I wanted to be able to leverage it. And so the very next step for me was to come to the US to be able to see firsthand how things are really transforming. And so it was a very clear path where I wanted to go for my master's degree. And MIT was the top-notch choice also with regards to how the entrepreneurial ecosystem is, how the tech world is there. It was an easy decision that way.
So you were sure you wanted to get into MBA, not masters in finance? Like, was that an easy decision?
Yeah, it was an easy decision because with Masters of Finance, what typically happens is that you come in with slightly less number of years of experience. I already had about 5 years of experience, so I was very well qualified for an MBA. And also what happens with an MBA is that, the kind of exposure and opportunities that you can look forward to after you graduate is also very distinct from what is offered in Masters in Finance, because the kind of roles with regards to the designation is also very different considering the kind of experience that you are coming with.
Interesting. So I wanted to ask more about your MIT experience, but before that I want to share that when I went to ISC Bangalore, right, I talked to so many PhD students, they don't want to come to the US. No, so many researchers at ISC Bangalore when I visited, they don't want to do research in the US. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
How would you convince them now?
In all honesty, Harnoor, I think there are two distinct things about, when considering about the opportunity to be in the US. I think from a more research perspective, I would not say that, they are at a significant disadvantage not being in the US for research, because research is fairly democratized from that perspective. I think when you think about coming to the US, the more opportunistic view is when you want to be an entrepreneur. Most importantly, because of the access to capital, the access of opportunities, the customer base here, etc., etc. The second, of course, like industry-wise, if you divide tech, there's no better place to be than in the US if you want to build in tech or want to work in tech, for example. And third, of course, is going to be if you want to work in the financial industry, right? So it's a lot dependent on the kind of work that you want to do and a lot also upon the industry. For me, it was a clear decision. Why? Because I wanted to try something at the intersection of tech and finance, and I wanted to build something of my own. It was a clear choice for me to be here in the US.
Your goal is also to like build in tech, build your own startup and then capitalize on that. So that would be your goal, right? So because you already have private equity experience, would you say what would you choose if you get an opportunity at BlackRock, Vanguard or State Street, or building your own startup in SF or New York? What would you prefer?
Yeah, I think when I came into the US, I was certain that I'll finish up my MBA and I'll take up a job with a private equity firm. I was very well positioned to do that. But I think that's just what US makes you, and especially in this time with AI, that I, decided that the time is now, and I have left that path completely, and I'm really working on my own startup, something at the intersection of financial services / private equity and AI. So I can leverage in my experience in private equity as well as leverage on this very interesting and amazing new technology.
Oh, very nice. And now, for all the youngsters watching this, what do you know now about achieving success in private equity? Would you teach to your younger self?
I think a lot of private equity is, again, game of networking, I would say. Even when I was in that position, let alone, before that position, even when I was in that position, a lot of private equity needs you to look at opportunities for you to invest. And how do you even look at those opportunities to be able to invest? It's like being in that circle, being observing of the kind of opportunities that there are, knowing about the industry, what emerging companies are coming in, what is happening in infrastructure, how much does it typically cost to do something like that. And then eventually, I think now there are a lot of resources online as well to be able to learn those financial skills.
100%. I also teach most of in my sessions as well. There are two ways to network. Basically, sit home, emailing. Same, totally agree. I also teach in my sessions that I conducted in India, I teach the same, that there are two ways to network. One is sit home, ask for referrals, DM, and other way is like just to knock doors, go out there. Like SF is such an open world. I was like, there's an hackathon I went to where I got rejected. I just walked in and they accepted me. So there are so many opportunities that open up when you just knock doors. So can you share how many opportunities have opened with cold emails versus knocking doors? It's just like going there.
I think cold emails work as a first instant, maybe in a couple of cases. But if you really want to convert an opportunity, it's about knocking doors. For me, if I see all of my internship opportunities, or even for my full-time jobs and how I got them, those were really for me to reach out to them, meet them in person, meet them in conferences, reading and researching about what they had done in their work, what they are doing, and how I can add value. And that was what my typical starting conversation looked like, where I used to, even start with, oh, I read about this work that you are doing. I think including this can be helpful as well. So they actually don't consider you as just a random person reaching out for like a couple of seconds, but actually remember you that, oh, this person said this. Oh, they actually read about my work, or something like that. So like leaving that lasting impression, again, as you mentioned, knocking on the door, meeting them in person is something which is absolutely important.
The difficult question most people ask is in networking, like first time network ho jata hai, but like how to maintain that network for long with a high net worth individual, how would you say is possible? Because you have worked under SEBI's chairman, like maintaining that network is very difficult for ordinary people. Like, वो Instagram पे तो होते नहीं है that you can react to their stories. So how do you what are the next steps? Like every 6 months coffee, every 1 year coffee, what is it like?
See, everybody is very busy in their life. If you don't have a value to add to their life, they'd probably just skim through that opportunity until you have a really strong relationship with them, correct? So it's really about you looking out for the industry they are working in, the work that they are doing. Instagram पे नहीं होते, LinkedIn पे होते, they keep posting about things. LinkedIn पे नहीं होते. You mentioned about I working with the SEBI chairman. He's a mentor to me. I keep seeing, news articles about him, he making a statement. So I literally just point out, oh, so I read about this that you mentioned. I think I agree with you. Having said that, I was super curious to understand what you think about X topic even further. Do you have like 10 minutes to chat? So not just reaching out, hey, how are you? But like reaching out with something material to ask or to add to them.
Excellent. Last question about private equity. What trends do you keep up with?
For me, in private equity, actually a lot of things come in together. A lot of macro trends you need to be careful of, because eventually it changes the cost of financing, your returns as well. But for somebody who is really just wanting to break into private equity, I'll say, they should think about what subsector in private equity they are interested in? Are they interested in going into fund of funds? Are they interested in investing in infrastructure, or are they interested in investing in matured companies, as we discussed? Once they have that set in, probably drilling down into those areas is something which is very important. So, for example, what are the major players?
Specifics.
Exactly. What are the major private equity firms in that country? What are the major private equity firms that are investing in the subsector of your interest? What are the kind of assets they are investing in? So, for example, infrastructure it comes like roads, airports, ports. For private equity, for the growth equity that we discussed in investing in matured companies, of course there are multiple sectors. You can invest in healthcare, you can invest in climate tech, or a whole set of other subsectors as well. So I think keeping up with those trends, what are the emerging companies, what is happening in the sector in general, is something which is very, very important.
Now my last question would be, how did you get 100% scholarship at MIT, especially for MBA? For MBA, it's unheard of. I mean, of course, my few friends got a Georgia Tech, but for especially at MIT, fully funded MBA opportunity is rare for many students.
Yeah, I think this application process has taught me a lot about how to really approach these applications. And a major part of the reason for why I got 100% scholarship at MIT was precisely because I showcased my leadership examples. While a lot of people say that GMAT is very important, a lot of other scores, brand name of companies you have worked with is very important. All of that is true to an extent. If you pass the hurdle of reaching, say, the average GMAT score that they have listed on their website,
like 700 plus, right?
Precisely. After that, it's all the game of how you showcase your leadership example. In my case, those leadership examples came from how I led the creation of a government company, or how I led the creation of a $2 billion fund, or even with my non-for-profit organization that I've been leading for many years. So bringing out those leadership examples, showcasing that you as an individual, if you are coming to MIT and when you will graduate, you are destined for a great path and will eventually create their brand name more, is what they want. Essentially motivates them.
I give same example to students. For example, like if everyone knows Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple, but they don't know which college he went to. And what Steve Wozniak has done, has made a community college in Bay Area, you know the name?
No.
De Anza College.
Okay.
More famous because
wow.
of his brand name. So all universities at the end of the day want is you become so successful like Steve Wozniak that their college become more famous because of you, as compared to because of them already being famous.
And also get more funding
from
their alums.
True. I mean, of course, Steve Wozniak funds so much. He donates so much of his wealth to his college. So so that's the goal. And once you keep that goal in mind, that my goal is to make university famous with my success. So show off your success that you were going to get after MIT. That's what they want. Awesome.
100%.
Excellent. What if you can give specific details, like what ambitions you showed in your MIT essay?
I think for me, ambition was very clear that I wanted to venture into entrepreneurship, even though that wasn't the path that I was initially destined on.
What problems statement, like in terms of like entrepreneurship?
Yeah, for me, I'm a very big proponent in creating positive social impact, and that's what my journey with non-for-profit organization has been. So even in my essays, that's something that I alluded to, that with whatever I do, even with the AI financial services thing, I hope in some way or form be able to give back to the society and be able to support people who come from underserved communities, or people who do not have the right access to capital to be able to accomplish great strides in their own lives.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kanika. It was great talking to you. Any final message for students?
The final message from my end would really be just to keep that inspiration within yourself alive. And even if you are targeting MIT, if you are targeting any college that currently seems very far-fetched, I think there's no harm in trying and giving your best. Build strong relationships, learn from different people about different industries, and you never know what opportunity really gets to you.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kanika. Great chat.